My name is Jamie C. Pollock, and I am 19 years old. I need to write this down because my head has been spinning for so long that it feels like my life is happening to someone else, like I'm watching a movie and screaming at the screen while the characters keep making worse choices. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who posts her whole life like a confession, but here I am trying to make the story hold still long enough so I can understand it. It started when my dad got diagnosed with cancer. I was 14, just starting high school, thinking my biggest problem was going to be algebra or whether I'd look weird in braces. Dad had been tired for a while, and we told ourselves it was work stress, the kind of tired adults carry because bills exist and sleep is optional. Then, one Tuesday after school, my mom sat me down in our kitchen and told me he had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The words didn't land at first. They floated in the air, too heavy to fit into my understanding of what could happen to us. The next 6 months were like watching a fast-forward version of grief. Dad got sick so quickly it felt unreal. He lost his hair, he lost weight. His favorite Chicago Bears jersey looked like a tent on him, fabric hanging off bones that didn't used to show. But he kept joking, like humor could bribe the universe into being kinder. He still helped me with math homework, even when he could barely sit up. I'd be holding a pencil and trying not to cry, while he'd tap the page with a shaky finger and say, "You're overthinking it, kiddo. Numbers don't bite." The last thing he said to me was right before they took him to the hospital for the final time. He was pale, smiling anyway, and he whispered, "Don't let your mom's cooking kill you before I get back." He always tried to make me laugh, even when his voice sounded like it had to climb a hill just to leave his throat. I laughed because he wanted me to. Then I cried in the hallway because I knew he wasn't coming back. He died on a Thursday. I remember because it was supposed to be pizza night. We always got deep dish on Thursdays. It was our ritual, the one normal thing that made our house feel like a home, even when everything else was falling apart. Instead of pizza, I was sitting in a hospital waiting room under flickering fluorescent lights that made everyone look sick. I watched my mom cry into her phone while telling relatives, her voice breaking in the same place each time like the words physically hurt to repeat. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the worst thing that will ever happen to me. I didn't know grief could be the opening scene. After Dad died, my mom didn't just mourn. She unraveled. 2 months later, she started dating. She said she needed to feel alive again, needed to remember she was still a person, not just a widow. I tried to be understanding. I told myself Dad wouldn't want her to be sad forever. I told myself people survive in different ways. But the speed of it scared me, like she was sprinting away from our old life, so she wouldn't have to look back and see what she left behind. That's how she met Derek, rich guy, real estate developer type, the kind of man who smelled like expensive cologne and confidence, who handed my mom gifts like they were proof he could rewrite her story. He started coming around constantly, bringing her fancy jewelry, taking her on weekend trips, filling our quiet house with a new kind of noise. I tried to be happy for her, I really did. But every time Derek laughed too loudly in our living room, it felt like he was occupying space my dad used to fill without even realizing it. Mom glowed around Derek in a way she hadn't glowed in months. She smiled more. She wore makeup again. She started posting photos like her life was a magazine spread, carefully cropped, carefully filtered, carefully edited. And slowly, without anyone saying it out loud yet, I could feel something happening. I wasn't being included in the new picture. Mom married Derek less than a year after Dad died. Less than a year. Saying that out loud still makes my stomach twist, because I remember how I was still sleeping in Dad's old hoodie at night, how I still expected to hear his cough from the hallway. And meanwhile, my mom was shopping for wedding venues like grief was just a phase she could decorate her way out of. The worst part was, I didn't even know they were engaged. She never sat me down, never asked how I felt. I found out when she handed me a junior bridesmaid dress she'd already bought and told me to try it on. The wedding was at a fancy country club in Newport Beach, the kind of place where everything smells like money and sunscreen, where the bathrooms have attendants and the chairs cost more than our old couch. Derek's rich friends were everywhere, smiling too wide, looking at my mom like she'd won something, and looking at me like I was a detail they hadn't ordered. I spent most of the reception hiding in the bathroom, trying not to cry. I remember staring at myself in the mirror under perfect lighting and thinking, Dad is gone, and now even Mom is disappearing, and nobody here cares because the flowers match the tablecloths. After the wedding, Mom and Derek moved into his massive house in Newport Beach. Pool, tennis court, a kitchen bigger than our entire old living room. It looked like a movie set, like no real person could actually live there without leaving fingerprints on something expensive. Derek walked me through the house the first time like he was showing me a museum, all polished pride. Mom was glowing, talking about new beginnings, talking about how grateful she was. And then, almost casually, she told me there wasn't room for me. Not room, in a house with a tennis court. She said I'd be more comfortable living with Dad's sister, Aunt Lisa, in Chicago. She said it like it was a favor, like she was thinking about my well-being, not about making her new life easier to stage. I remember standing in that giant foyer with the marble floors and the chandelier and feeling like I'd been boxed up and labeled fragile, like I was being shipped away. Aunt Lisa lived in a huge house in Lincoln Park with Uncle Marcus and my cousins Michael and Rebecca. Michael was 17. Rebecca was 18. When we were kids, we used to be close. They'd come visit every summer, and we'd build blanket forts and make up stupid games and stay up too late laughing like nothing in the world could touch us. I clung to those memories like they were proof I wouldn't be alone. But the moment I moved in, I realized I wasn't their fun summer cousin anymore. I was an extra person in their house, an unwanted addition that made their perfect life feel crowded. Michael started accidentally knocking over my stuff. Rebecca made little comments about how her clothes were too nice to lend me when I arrived without proper winter gear. They acted like my existence was an inconvenience. Aunt Lisa was the worst. She didn't even pretend to be kind. She made it clear from day one that I was a burden, a responsibility she didn't ask for. And then she started charging me rent even though I was still in high school. I was 15. 15. Who charges a grieving teenager rent while she's still trying to figure out where she belongs? Aunt Lisa did, with a straight face, like it was normal. Mom sent money sometimes, but it was never enough to cover what Aunt Lisa demanded. When I tried to call Mom, she was always too busy. Too busy at yoga, too busy at charity events, too busy on weekend trips with Derek, too busy to talk to her own kid. I would see photos online of her and Derek in Europe, on boats, at fancy parties, living a whole other life where I didn't exist. And then she did the thing that still hurts the most. She archived all our old family photos, the ones with Dad, the ones with me. She said they didn't match her new profile aesthetic. Like my dad's face was a stain on her curated brand. Like our life before Derek was something she needed to hide so the new version could look clean. At night in Aunt Lisa's basement room, I started having dreams about our old kitchen, about pizza night, about Dad laughing, like my brain kept dragging me back to the last place I felt safe. Then I'd wake up staring at expensive wallpaper and a ceiling that wasn't mine and realize I'd lost both parents. Not just one. One to death. One to choice. After my first month there, Aunt Lisa raised the rent because of property taxes. I didn't even argue. I just did the math and realized I had to get a job. That's when Rebecca told me, with this fake helpful tone, about a 24-hour laundromat hiring in what she called the sketchy part of Chicago. It wasn't just sketchy, it was a rundown building wedged between a closed-down dollar store and a phone repair shop that I'm pretty sure never repaired a single phone. The owner, an old guy named Jerry, took one look at me and said, "You're way too young to work the midnight shift." I told him I could start that night and I wouldn't complain about the pay. Suddenly my age wasn't an issue anymore. That's how my life became midnight to 6 a.m. at the laundromat, then school, then 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. at a gas station. I was running on fumes before I even learned to drive properly in the snow. And my cousins, instead of feeling bad, decided my exhaustion was entertainment. Because in that house, I wasn't family. I was a joke they could tell whenever they needed to feel bigger. The gas station job was where everything really went off the rails. It was called Quick Stop, right across from my cousin's private school, the kind of place where tuition probably cost more than I made in a year. Michael and his friends thought it was hilarious to come in during my shifts and treat the store like their personal playground. They'd knock over chip displays I'd just finished organizing, accidentally spill slushies all over the floor, leave opened bags of beef jerky on the counters. Every time they'd smirk at me like they were daring me to say something. Rebecca was worse because she was quieter about it. She'd come in with her cheerleader friends and talk loudly about me, like I wasn't standing right there. "Oh my God, can you imagine having to work here? I'd literally die." Or, "Ew, look at that uniform, it's so polyester." Then they'd take pictures of me cleaning up messes and post them online. I didn't even know how many people were laughing at me until kids at school started leaving quarters on my desk for laundry. Someone taped a label to my locker that said washer girl. I was sleeping through classes because my body just couldn't keep up. Teachers kept asking if everything was okay at home. I told them I was adjusting to the move, because how do you say, I'm working 2 jobs to pay rent to my aunt who hates me while my mom pretends I don't exist? My grades started slipping, and that scared me more than the bullying. School was the one thing I thought could get me out. The only bright spot during those nights was a homeless guy named Pete who came into the laundromat most evenings. He wasn't creepy or loud like some of the other customers. He showed me how to fix the quarter machine when it jammed, and which regulars were okay to let slide if they were a coin short. One night he laughed and said, "Kid, you're playing life on expert mode right now." It was the first time I'd laughed in weeks. When winter got really bad, Pete stopped coming around. I still wonder what happened to him. Uncle Marcus owned the building, but I never saw him. He had a property management company handle everything. Sometimes late at night, I'd notice fancy cars driving by real slow, headlights sweeping across the laundromat windows. I didn't know then that they weren't random. Aunt Lisa kept raising the rent. Utilities went up. HOA fees increased. "Your room is prime real estate," she said about a converted basement storage space that had mushrooms growing in the corner. I started hiding cash in an old teddy bear Dad gave me before he died, stuffing bills into its torn seam, like I was building a secret escape fund. Every time I got close to enough to leave, something happened. School fees, winter boots, Michael backing his car into mine, and somehow me being the one who had to pay. The final straw came when I got home from my gas station shift and found my room trashed. The teddy bear was ripped open, stuffing everywhere. All my savings were gone. Rebecca said she'd just been cleaning and didn't know anything about money. That same week, Aunt Lisa doubled the rent. I did the math and realized even with both jobs, I couldn't afford it anymore. I'd been taking classes at a community college nearby, trying to get ahead. The counselor told me I might qualify for financial aid if I enrolled more seriously. That meant choosing education over paying Aunt Lisa's rent. So I chose education. I packed what fit into my old Toyota. Rust spots everywhere, heat that only worked if you kicked the dashboard just right, but it was mine. The first night sleeping in the car wasn't terrible. I parked behind the laundromat, used my work keys to sneak in for the bathroom, reclined the seat, layered every blanket I owned. I told myself it was temporary. Then winter hit. Real Chicago winter. The kind of cold that makes your eyes hurt. My battery started dying, so I couldn't run the heat much. The worst part wasn't the cold. It was pretending to be normal. Explaining wrinkled homework that smelled like detergent. Wearing the same clothes over and over. Cops knocking on my window telling me I couldn't sleep there. Driving in circles until they left. Watching my gas gauge drop and praying it'd last until morning. Michael figured it out. Followed me one night after my laundromat shift. The next day, their TikTok had a whole series called My Homeless Cousin. They filmed my frost-covered windows, me studying by the laundromat sign, even me changing clothes in the back seat. It went viral in their rich kid bubble. People started driving by, honking, throwing stuff. The cops came more often. I spent nights driving just to stay warm. Then I started noticing a black SUV parked nearby some nights. Different spots, same car, tinted windows, engine running. It never bothered me. I didn't know it was watching. The coldest night was -15. The car wouldn't start. My phone was dead. The laundromat was closed for repairs. I wrapped myself in everything I owned and thought, this is how I die. That's when someone knocked on my window. It was Uncle Marcus, standing there like it was totally normal to be outside at 2 a.m. in Arctic temperatures. He just said, "I think we need to talk." Uncle Marcus didn't lecture me. He didn't yell. He didn't look disappointed. He just stood there in the snow like the cold was an inconvenience he'd decided not to acknowledge. "My office has better heating," he said, like he was offering me a cup of coffee instead of rescuing me from freezing to death in my car. I followed him across the icy pavement and up a narrow staircase I'd never noticed before. Above the laundromat was a small office space I didn't know existed. It had real walls, real heat, a desk, a mini fridge, even a tiny bathroom. When he handed me a mug of coffee, my hands shook so badly I almost spilled it. I wrapped them around the cup anyway. letting the warmth seep into my fingers like it might convince my body I was still alive. He watched me in silence for a long moment, eyes sharp, but not cruel. Then he said something that made my brain short-circuit. "Your dad and I used to sleep in a car, too." I laughed, a weird broken sound. "What?" He pulled out his phone and showed me an ancient photo. Two skinny teenagers sitting in a beat-up van, eating beans straight out of a can. One of them had my dad's smile, the same one I saw in old photos, the one that used to make everything feel okay. "That's your father," Uncle Marcus said quietly. I just stared at the screen. All my life, I'd known Uncle Marcus as this insanely wealthy real estate guy who wore suits that probably cost more than my car. I'd never imagined him as someone who knew what it felt like to have nowhere to go. He told me how they grew up dirt poor, how their mom worked 3 jobs and still couldn't keep the lights on some months. The laundromat's original owner used to let them stay inside on freezing nights if they helped clean or fix machines. When the owner got sick, he offered to sell the place cheap. Uncle Marcus scraped together everything he had. That laundromat was his first property. Then he opened a drawer and pulled out old documents, deeds, contracts, business plans. My dad's handwriting was all over them in the margins. "Your father helped build all this," Marcus said. "He just didn't want the credit." My throat burned. "When your dad got sick, Shab," he continued, "he made me promise 2 things. 1, to look out for you. 2, to make sure you learned how to look out for yourself." He paused, then gave me this small, tired smile. "Got to say, you're doing better at the second part than I expected." That's when he handed me a key. It was for a small studio apartment above his office. Not fancy. 1 room, a kitchenette, a bathroom. Warm, clean, safe. "No rent," he said, "as long as you keep your grades up and keep working here." I tried to say no. It felt like charity. He shut that down instantly. "This isn't charity. It's an investment." I slept in a real bed that night. The next morning, everything exploded. Michael saw me coming down the stairs and took pictures. Aunt Lisa showed up at the laundromat screaming that I was trying to steal her husband. Customers stared. One old lady filmed the whole thing. Uncle Marcus kicked her out and they had a massive fight upstairs. Then my mom called. Then she and Derek showed up. They accused me of manipulating Uncle Marcus for money, of being a gold digger. I finally snapped and told them everything. About being sent away, about the rent, about the car, about sleeping behind the laundromat. Mom tried to dismiss it as ancient history. I threw her words back at her. I kicked them out. That same week, Michael found something on Aunt Lisa's iPad. Messages, emails, plans. Aunt Lisa and Derek, together, secret lovers, planning to steal millions from Uncle Marcus's business and run away. They'd been doing it for over a year. Every rent increase, every fake expense, all of it feeding a secret account. Even my cousin's college funds were gone. I called Uncle Marcus immediately. His face went blank when he saw the messages. He didn't panic. He called lawyers, accountants, investigators. Turns out the FBI cares a lot about wire fraud and embezzlement. They decided to wait and gather evidence. Michael's 18th birthday party became the trap. Family only. The lawyer showed up mid-party. Bank records spread across the table. Recordings played. Aunt Lisa tried to run. The FBI arrested her and Derek in front of everyone. My mom collapsed when she realized Derek had stolen her money too. After that, everything changed fast. Aunt Lisa and Derek went to jail. Mom went to rehab. Michael and Rebecca moved into my tiny studio. They got jobs at the laundromat. They apologized. We started functioning like a real family for the first time. Uncle Marcus started teaching us the business. We visited Dad's grave together. Uncle Marcus told us stories. He said Dad knew this would happen somehow. That's why he made Marcus promise not to save me too soon. I sit in the laundromat office now. My office. The machines hum. The lights are warm. I didn't get rescued. I survived long enough to be chosen. The days after the arrest didn't feel real. It was like the volume on life had been turned down, everything muffled and distant, while my brain tried to catch up to what had just happened. One minute we were pretending to care about balloons and cake for Michael's birthday, and the next, there were federal agents in the living room reading Aunt Lisa her rights, while Derek kept shouting that there had been a misunderstanding. What stuck with me the most was that neither of them looked at their kids, not once. Michael was standing by the staircase, hands clenched into fists, so tight his knuckles were white. and Rebecca was frozen on the couch, mascara streaking down her face. Aunt Lisa screamed about how we were ruining her life. Derek yelled about lawyers and explanations, but they didn't say sorry, didn't ask if their kids were okay, didn't even flinch at the fact that their son's 18th birthday had turned into a crime scene. The FBI agents moved fast. They separated everyone, took statements, sealed off offices, copied hard drives. Uncle Marcus didn't say much. He didn't need to. His face was calm in a way that scared me more than yelling ever could. This was a man who had built everything from nothing, and he was watching it be torn apart by the person he trusted most. That night, Michael and Rebecca didn't want to go back to the house. They came to my tiny studio instead, carrying backpacks stuffed with random clothes and electronics, like kids running from a fire with whatever they could grab. Rebecca kept apologizing, over and over, like saying sorry enough times could rewrite the past. Michael didn't say much at all. He just sat on the floor with his back against the wall, staring at nothing. We figured it out. Michael took the futon. Rebecca shared my bed. We made rules about the bathroom so nobody lost their mind. The space was cramped, but for the first time, it felt safe. No screaming, no accusations, no rent threats. Just 3 people trying to breathe. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings and paperwork. Uncle Marcus had accountants combing through years of transactions, fake maintenance companies, shell vendors, transfers that made my stomach drop when I saw the totals. Aunt Lisa and Derek hadn't just planned to steal. They'd been actively draining the business, slowly enough that it looked like normal expenses if you didn't know what you were looking for. Almost $1 million already moved. $4.3 million planned. College funds emptied. Charity money redirected. I learned that evil isn't always loud. Sometimes it wears yoga pants and runs PTA meetings and smiles for group photos. Mom went completely off the rails when the truth came out. Turns out Derek had been stealing from her too. Papers she signed without reading. Accounts she thought were joint but weren't. Money she believed came from investments that never existed. She had a breakdown that scared everyone. Uncle Marcus insisted she get help, real help, not another vacation disguised as healing. She checked into rehab, not for substances, but for the kind of denial that eats a person alive from the inside out. Michael and Rebecca started working at the laundromat. It was awkward at first. Rebecca didn't know how to talk to customers without sounding like she was above them. Michael tried to fix everything at once and broke more than he repaired. But they learned. Rebecca turned out to be great with people when she wasn't being cruel. Michael had a natural talent with machines, an instinct for listening to what was wrong before taking things apart. Watching them struggle and improve felt strange and satisfying, like the universe finally leveling something that had been tilted for too long. One night, Rebecca sat next to me on the bed and said, "I'm really sorry for everything I did to you." Not dramatically, not performatively, just quiet. I thought being rich meant being better. Turns out it just made me mean. I didn't forgive her right away. But I didn't push her away either. We were all rebuilding from rubble, and I was tired of carrying anger like it was my job. Uncle Marcus started teaching us about the business. Not just numbers, but why things worked, why they mattered. He talked about my dad constantly, about how he'd insisted on treating people fairly, about how he believed a business should support a community, not just extract from it. Sitting there, listening, I realized something that made my chest ache. My dad hadn't failed to protect me. He'd planned for this, just not in the way I expected. One afternoon, while we were closing up, Uncle Marcus said, "Your father always said strength isn't about never falling. It's about knowing how to get back up without becoming something you hate." He looked at all 3 of us. "You kids are doing that." For the first time in years, I believed that maybe losing everything I thought I hadn't been the end of my story. Maybe it was the beginning of a different one built on truth instead of appearances. The quiet after chaos is always the strangest part. Once the arrests were made and the lawyers took over, there was nothing left to scream about. No one left to accuse. Just consequences slowly unfolding, one document at a time. Uncle Marcus warned us early that the fallout would be long and ugly, that the criminal case would move faster than the civil one, and that family damage doesn't resolve on the same timeline as court filings. He was right. Aunt Lisa and Derek tried to turn on each other almost immediately. Through their lawyers, they both claimed the other was the mastermind. Derek said Lisa manipulated him, that he'd been blinded by love. Lisa said Derek was the predator, that he used her grief over Dad to exploit her access to Marcus's accounts. Watching it play out felt surreal, like listening to two people argue over who lit the house on fire while the ashes were still warm. Michael struggled the most. Finding out your own mother was willing to steal your future to run away with someone else's husband does something to you. He'd go quiet for days, then explode over small things like a jammed dryer or a customer complaining about soap residue. Uncle Marcus took him aside one night and said, "Anger isn't wrong, but aim it carefully, or it will eat you alive." Michael started channeling it into work. He stayed late, learned every machine, fixed problems no one else noticed. Rebecca changed too, though in a different way. She became hyper-aware of how she spoke, how she moved, how she treated people. Sometimes she'd freeze mid-sentence, like she was checking herself for old habits. She asked me once if people could ever really change, or if they just learned how to hide better. I told her I didn't know, but trying mattered more than pretending you already had. Mom came out of rehab thinner, quieter, stripped of her performative confidence. She apologized to me in pieces, never all at once, like she was afraid if she said everything she'd collapse under the weight of it. She admitted she'd ignored red flags with Derek because admitting them meant admitting she'd abandoned me when I needed her most. It wasn't a full reconciliation, not yet, but it was the first time she spoke without an audience in mind. The investigation uncovered more than anyone expected. Fake passports, storage lockers with packed suitcases, detailed escape plans down to flight times and aliases. Aunt Lisa and Derek weren't just stealing, they were preparing to erase themselves. The FBI agents told us they would have been gone within weeks if Michael hadn't opened that iPad. That thought haunted me. How close we'd come to never knowing the truth, to being left behind with nothing but questions and empty accounts. Uncle Marcus started involving us more seriously in the business, not as charity, not as inheritance promises, but as responsibility. Rebecca learned customer relations and bookkeeping. Michael took over maintenance planning. I worked on scheduling, budgets, compliance. It felt strange stepping into something that big, but also right, like following a path my dad had quietly mapped out long ago. One evening, Uncle Marcus pulled me aside and said, "Your father knew people would disappoint you. He just didn't want disappointment to be the thing that defined you." He told me Dad believed hardship revealed character the same way pressure reveals cracks in concrete. You don't curse the pressure, you fix the mix. I thought about that a lot, about how my cousins and I were different versions of the same story, shaped by money, neglect, and choices we didn't get to make. And yet here we were, learning to build something real from the mess. The case moved forward. Aunt Lisa and Derek were denied bail. Their assets were frozen. Charges stacked up. The headlines were brutal, and suddenly the same social circles that once praised them went silent. No more smiling charity photos. No more perfect family posts. Reputation, it turns out, is fragile when it's built on lies. And through it all, the laundromat kept running. Machines humming, customers folding clothes, life continuing in small, ordinary ways. I started to realize that survival isn't loud. It's repetitive. It's showing up even when you're tired. It's choosing not to become bitter, even when bitterness would be easier. It took months for everything to finally settle, and even then, settle is probably the wrong word. Nothing went back to the way it was before. It couldn't. Too much truth had been dragged into the light, and once that happens, you don't get to pretend you didn't see it. Aunt Lisa and Derek were eventually charged with wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and intent to flee the country. The lawyers explained it all in calm, careful language, but the reality was simple. They were going to prison. Not for a short time, not with a slap on the wrist. Real consequences. When I heard the sentence, I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel relieved. I just felt empty, like a chapter had finally closed and left behind silence instead of applause. Michael and Rebecca testified. Watching them sit there, answering questions about their own mother, was one of the hardest things I've ever seen. Michael's voice shook when he talked about his college fund being gone. Rebecca cried when she admitted she'd helped mock me online while her own future was being quietly stolen. Afterward, they hugged each other in the hallway like kids again. Not rich kids, not bullies, not victims, just siblings who had lost something and survived it. Mom tried to attend every hearing. Sometimes she had to leave early because it was too much. She started therapy after rehab and slowly, painfully, began to understand how her choices after Dad's death had created a vacuum that other people rushed to exploit. One afternoon, sitting across from me in the laundromat office, she said, "I was so afraid of being alone that I forgot you already were." It wasn't a full apology, but it was honest, and that mattered. Uncle Marcus finalized the business restructuring. He dissolved the roles Aunt Lisa had controlled and created new ones for us. Not because we were family, but because we'd earned it. He told us straight up that trust had to be rebuilt with action, not blood. Rebecca handled customer accounts with care I wouldn't have believed possible a year ago. Michael became indispensable with the machines. And me, I found myself doing what my dad used to do, balancing numbers and people, making sure no one was forgotten in the margins. We visited Dad's grave together on a quiet afternoon. No drama, no speeches. Uncle Marcus told stories about the early days, about how Dad used to stay up late helping tenants figure out payment plans instead of evicting them, about how he believed dignity mattered more than profit. I realized then that everything Uncle Marcus had done for me wasn't random or cruel or some twisted test. It was continuation. He was keeping a promise. Life now feels steadier, even if it's still fragile. I'm in school full-time. I have a real bed, a real address, and people who show up when it matters. Rebecca and Michael still struggle sometimes. Trauma doesn't disappear just because justice happens. But we talk, we work, we build something honest together. Sometimes I think about the girl I was, sleeping in a freezing car behind a laundromat, convinced she'd been forgotten by everyone who was supposed to love her. I wish I could tell her what I know now. That survival isn't shameful, that being abandoned doesn't mean you're worthless, that sometimes the people who hurt you are unknowingly pushing you toward the ones who will actually see you. I didn't get rescued. I endured long enough to be recognized, and in the end, that made all the difference.